Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily here on the Fan Arch Network. John Saponaro with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. But of course, before we get started, a special thank you goes to our friends over at Kalshi for sponsoring the video. You already know, but for a limited time, use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. Well, the New York Mets lose the rubber match against the Toronto Blue Jays up in Toronto at the Rogers Center on Canada Day, 9-3, to fall to 15 games under 500. Now, I know I talked on this show. People have mentioned in the comments. We've gone back and forth. We've debated. We've said whether or not the season was over at different points throughout the month in June, whether or not we had reason to believe, whether or not we were hanging on. And I went a couple days ago and I said, that's it. The white flag has been waved. It's officially done. It's officially over. But for those of you who were a bit better than me, those of you who held on to faith a little bit longer, those of you who said, but mathematically, John, and there weren't many of you. There were not many. For those of you who held out, guys, it's over. 15 games under 500. It's July. It's over. They ain't coming back from this. And look, again, I know that there's not many people that are still in that camp, but I've seen some on Mets Twitter. I've seen some in the Mets landscape talking about mathematically possible. And yes, of course. But when you watch this team for as many months as we've watched this team now, it's a bad team. It's a bad team. And I don't care what percentage of blame gets put on which person. And I don't care where your thought process lies with assigning that blame. I don't care. It's a bad team. Season was over in June. $400 million payroll. And there's not much more you could say about it. About this particular game, I'll say this. They can't pitch. Freddie Peralta, we'll talk about in a second, has been abysmal, and I never thought I'd have to say that. They don't hit until late. Despite the fact that Toronto goes with an opener, Toronto then goes to, it's really a full-fledged bullpen game in a way, because not only do they go to an opener, but they go to a second relief pitcher, and then they go to Patrick Corbin, who got bumped out of the rotation because he's been so terrible. The Mets can't hit. Patrick Corbin's been terrible for 10 years, it feels like. So, the Mets make a little bit of noise when the game is well out of hand and they score 3 runs, I believe, all in the 8th and 9th innings, couple home runs. You like to see, what Benj did. You like to see Lindor hit. Of course, if you care about the Mets, you care about the future of the franchise, which we all do. But, 9-3, 9-0, who cares? It doesn't matter. My biggest takeaway from this game has nothing to do with the game. Zero. Literally zero. If you follow me for a long time, I'm a fashion guy. I'm a style guy. I like vintage clothes. I like a lot of whatever. And I don't really get into like certain things that are sports fashion just because, I'm kind of tied to my teams, right? Like I'm not going to wear something that's not Mets gear, right? I'm not going to rep for another baseball team. But the Canada Day uniforms and the Canada Day concept, and specifically the Canada Day caps for the Toronto Blue Jays are so good. It's clean. The aesthetic is incredible. The fact that it's a once a year thing that they do is great. The Mets haven't played in Toronto on Canada Day. I think they said on the broadcast since 1998, something like that. So it's a long time. So I don't follow American League baseball. I don't follow the Toronto Blue Jays. I knew that they did something for Canada Day, but I probably was deep down back somewhere in the recesses of my mind. I was aware of the fact that they had their special uniforms that they broke out just for today or just for yesterday. But I just thought they were so good in an era where the marketing and the uniforms are so hyper commercialized, where every team needs to have some kind of gimmick. And look, I like alternate uniforms. I think throwback uniforms are cool. I don't like the City Connects by and large. I think they're a failed experiment. I think most of the City Connect uniforms fall somewhere in the range from uninspired to absolutely terrible. I think there's a handful that kind of got it right and are worthwhile, but as a overarching concept now where most teams, or I don't know what the number is, a handful of teams, a bunch of teams are on their second iteration of City Connects, I think that's been a failed experiment. But sometimes alternate jerseys are just perfect. They just get it right, and it just captures something. And for the Toronto Blue Jays, who, they've always worn some form of blue, obviously, even when they went through their Vernon Wells black jersey phase and their kind of modern new millennium aesthetic that they had in the 2000s. They've always worn some kind of blue. And for them to, kind of pay homage to the country of Canada and go with the all red and white uniforms with the classic Toronto Blue Jays logo on the cap with that little bit of blue, man, that is a sharp looking concept for a uniform. And again, something that works once a year, something that they roll out one time in a baseball season. The attention to detail is great. I think the idea behind it is great. And I think the execution is great. And I think Gary Cohen said this on the TV broadcast, but I agree. Also, the commitment by the fans for a uniform that is worn once a year. So many fans in Toronto have that jersey, and they wear it on Canada Day so that it is a sea of red and white. And shout out to them. Shout out to them for doing it. So I know this is Mets Daily. This ain't Blue Jays Daily. This ain't Uniform Daily. But this is going to be some of the stuff that we talk about sometimes because it's interesting to me. And I think if it's interesting to me, it'll be interesting to you in a season that is otherwise unofficially over, to take that part of the conversation full circle. You're 15 games under on July 2nd as the Mets are not playing today, mercifully, off day in Atlanta. But you're 15 games under. It's over. And a large part of the reason why it's over is Freddie Peralta. We've talked about Freddie Peralta on this show before. I may have even used the same headline, The Curious Case of Freddie Peralta. I don't remember. After I uploaded it and I started the recording, I was like, did I say this once before? But it doesn't matter because this Mets season has been one sort of continuous day. This Mets season has been the nightmare that you have when you're asleep. You wake up and you're still in the nightmare. That's what this Mets season has been. So Freddie Peralta has put the Mets in an awful spot. And a lot was made of the start that Bichette got off to, and, how the Bichette wasn't Bichette when the Mets needed him the most, and all of that. And I understand it, and I've made my case as to why I think Bichette is an important piece for the Mets to keep around in 2027 and hopefully beyond that. I'd like to see him play out this entire contract with the Mets because I think the Mets are going to need a player like Bichette, but I digress. Freddie Peralta, at a time when the Mets really needed him in more ways than one, has been bad. At least with Bo Bichette, the Mets went out and they signed a player. They gave the player a lot of money on a short-term deal, which is what Stearns wanted to do, to get him here. He's in a position where maybe he opts out, and if you don't like Bichette, then you say, okay, no big deal. He was here for a year, didn't work out. He opted out. We saved a bunch of money on the back end those last 2 years of the deal. Fine. If he stays and he is successful and he rebounds and he has a full start to finish Bo Bichette season or seasons, well, that's great because you're still only committed to him till he's 30 years old. With Freddie Peralta, the Mets went out and traded 2 top 100 prospects for him. Now, I'm not a prospect hugger. Trade all the prospects you want to get back the asset you feel like you need. So I supported this trade when the Mets made it, and I still support the trade. It just sucks that when you go out and you make a deal like this and it doesn't work out to the degree that it has not worked out, it doesn't matter what Brandon Sproat and Jet Williams become or don't become. It then becomes all about asset allocation. And did you make the right trade for the right person when these players had a significant amount of value? If you go back far enough, so much was made of the Mets trading Scott Kazmir when the Mets traded Scott Kazmir. Now, Scott Kazmir went on to have a good career, not a great career. He was not the kind of prospect that you thought he didn't turn into the kind of player that the kind of prospect billing would have led you to believe. But the problem wasn't that the Mets traded Scott Kazmir. It's that the Mets at that point could have traded Scott Kazmir for damn near any player in Major League Baseball. And obviously that's a bit of hyperbole, but the Mets could have traded Scott Kazmir as the headliner for a lot of different players. And instead, they traded Kazmir for Victor Zambrano, who I think the Mets could have got without giving up what was a top prospect, a top pitching prospect, a top left-handed prospect in the sport. And so with this Peralta situation, it's a little different in that you had to trade the kind of pieces that the Mets did trade to get him. I don't think this was bad asset allocation from a thought process standpoint. It was always going to take something like 2 top 100 prospects. The frustrating part, and again, this is regardless of what Sproat and Williams become or don't become, is that Freddie Peralta has offered you almost nothing in return. And now you sit there and you go, man, is our process broken? Because could we have used those 2 prospects to help us in other ways? Could we have used those 2 prospects separately in 2 different deals to get us 2 different players that we would have needed? And I'm just making this up, but like, could we have used Brandon Sproat in a deal to get us a different pitcher? Not Tarek Skubal. Or maybe, I mean, but it would have taken a lot more than Brandon Sproat. But could we have used Brandon Sproat as the headliner to get us a different pitcher? And then could we have used Jet Williams to get us, I don't know, Contreras to play first base? And could we have broken things up that way? And then the Mets never have Peralta, and the Mets never need to go out and get Jorge Polanco. And you see how this domino effect can take hold. So Freddie Peralta has been bad, but Freddie Peralta has now hurt the Mets from an asset allocation standpoint. Freddie Peralta was not as advertised even when Freddie Peralta wasn't terrible for the Mets. And then when the Mets suffered all of these injuries, he really didn't provide any relief. He's never been the stopper. When the Mets rotation was pitching well, Peralta was fine. And when the Mets rotation started to get injured and started to be ineffective, and the Mets really needed Peralta, especially as Nolan McLean was going through what a rookie is going to go through, those bumps in the road, Freddie Peralta never provided relief. So now that's 3 strikes against Freddie Peralta. And there's a 4th one that we could talk about in a minute, which is his trade value. But the crazy thing with Peralta has been 3 issues. We know Freddie Peralta is basically a 5-inning pitcher. So the short outings don't bother me. Now, look, 3 2/3, 4 1/3, those are going to bother me. But Freddie Peralta being a 5-inning pitcher, 5 1/3 inning pitcher, that doesn't bother me. Not in the modern game. Would you like more? Of course you'd like more length, but it's okay to give, 5 1/3 on average, 5 innings, 5 2/3. That's okay. What's not okay is the blow-ups, and we've talked about the blow-up outings before. When Freddie Peralta's been okay, he's been okay. And what I mean by that, it's a very dumb sentence, but if he goes 5 innings and gives up, 5 or 6 innings, let's say, and gives up 3 runs or less, that's been fine. That's kept the Mets in the game. But then his bad outings have been 4 innings, 5 runs, 3 innings, 6 runs, 2 innings, 10 runs. Just awful, unpitchable. So it's been sort of night and day in terms of what he's offered. Also, his K rate is down. This is a guy who's always struck guys out. Struck out 200 plus batters last X amount of years. I don't even remember what the exact stat is, but basically it's him and Dylan Cease. And even when Dylan Cease has had some bad years, and Dylan Cease has had ERAs that are in the high fours, hovering around 5, he still struck out people at a high rate. He still struck out 200 batters in a year. Freddie Peralta's ERA is now in the high fours. And he's not striking out guys the way that he normally does. And his fastball effectiveness is down. This is a guy, they call him 5-inning Freddie, fine. They call him fastball Freddie too. And the fastball effectiveness is down. So the blow-up option, the blow-up potential, these blow-up games is bad. The K rate and just the overall strikeout numbers he's putting up being down, that's bad. And the fastball effectiveness, the fastball, not the usage, because the usage is still there, but the fastball effectiveness being down is also bad. And those last two, the K rate and the fastball effectiveness, I think lead to the blow-up outings. But the fastball effectiveness and the K rate being down are mysteries. Why? The guy's 29, just turned 30 years old like 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago now, probably. Why? Where did the stuff go? Is it a confidence thing? Is it a pitching coach thing? And then it brings you back again to the point of, is our process wrong? Maybe. And now he's hurt the Mets because of all that in a fourth way, which is the trade value being down. The Mets, you didn't want to talk about this, but the Mets had a great trade chip, starting pitcher, and now it looks like you'd be lucky to get anything for him. Because it's not just the numbers that are bad, where a team might look at Peralta and say, you know what, the Mets just had a bad season, and he got swept up in it, but his stuff is still good. So we'll give up something of significance to get him because we think he'll be better for us. And that still might be true, and I think to a degree it will be true. But when you see the K rate being down, you see the strikeouts being down, you see the fastball effectiveness being down, that's the under-the-hood stuff that other teams look at and they go, maybe somebody else. You know? I don't know if we can fix that, period, and I especially don't know if we can fix that on the fly. So maybe we'll go with somebody else. So now, the weird thing in this situation becomes, is the way for the Mets to get the most value out of Freddie Peralta by keeping him? And I know you're going to say, John, well, if he sucks, why would you keep him? Yeah, I get that. But if you're not going to get back something of value at the deadline, at least one top 100 prospect, which maybe you can get, but I'm not sure. I don't know. If you're not going to get that back, then maybe the best idea is to keep Freddie Peralta through the season. Give him the qualifying offer while the qualifying offer still exists, because it may go away in the next CBA. But by the time the Mets hit free agency and the timing of the expiring of the CBA in December, they would have had the opportunity to sort out this qualifying offer situation. Offer him the QO. If he rejects it and somebody else signs him, take the draft pick and run. But maybe the better thing is Freddie Peralta looks at this and says, you know what? I'll take that qualifying offer because I'm not getting a deal. I'll rebuild my value for $20 whatever million on a 1-year deal. Maybe that's the move for the New York Mets. Now, again, I know what you're thinking. If he sucks in 2026, why would he be better in 2027? I don't know. Regression to the mean? Comfortability? A better team around him? Less pressure because now he's gone through a walk year and he sucked? I mean, look, we saw it with Pete Alonso, right? Pete Alonso had a terrible walk year with the Mets. He re-ups on what was essentially a 1-year deal last season, has a really good year, parlays that into a multi-year contract for a lot of money. So maybe the best outcome for Freddie Peralta and the Mets now is keep him. Keep him, give him the qualifying offer, keep him for 2027, and then see what happens after that. And I know that's weird after I just spent 10 minutes talking about how bad he is, but that might be the only / best option for the New York Mets. Baseball season is here, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi. Before I hit record, I went on over to the Kalshi app, Mets have an off day today, so I said, let's get a little creative. Let's see what's what around the National League East. You know, the Philadelphia Phillies have been on a run. The Philadelphia Phillies have closed the gap with the Atlanta Braves to the tune of now they're just 2.5 games behind Atlanta for the lead in the NL East. And so if you go on the Kalshi app, you'll see that Philadelphia to win the NL East is trading at 50 cents a share. And they are on the come up. They are trending upward. Atlanta to win the NL East is now trading at that same 50 cents a share. And they are hanging on by a thread. Now, 50 cents a share is okay value. But the fact that you could get the same value for both of those plays right now, where $100 will get you roughly $193, I think is pretty good value to pick your flavor and run with it. Now, you'll have to wait another couple months to see what happens. But if you say, man, and I know both of these teams, it sucks that the Mets are not in this conversation. And I know both of these teams are teams that if you're a Mets fan, you hate for one reason or another. But if you're trying to make something out of this baseball season because the Mets aren't giving you anything, then I think you pick your flavor and you say, you know what? I think I'm going to ride the hot hand with Philadelphia. 50 cents a share. Or, yeah, Philadelphia is the hot hand, but Atlanta's the better team. 50 cents a share. So I thought that was an interesting one. Not related to our New York Mets, but related to the NL East, certainly. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there is no house. As the probability changes, you can buy into and out of your position for a limited time. Use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, trade on anything. Must be 18 and over. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Big topic of conversation the last day or so has been Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen put out a tweet the day the Mets fired Carlos Mendoza. Of course, David Stearns had a press conference. The interim manager, Andy Green, had a press conference. But all we got from Steve Cohen was a fairly generic statement. And then he was asked essentially when he was going to speak, and he said he would speak soon. Soon has happened. Soon came to fruition on, I think it's called The Show, the baseball podcast with Joel Sherman and John Heyman, two longtime beat writers in the New York scene. And I thought Cohen, and I think you should give it a listen. I'm not in the business of promoting other podcasts that aren't Mets Daily, but I think you should give it a listen so that you can hear directly from Steve Cohen. And I think that you should listen to the podcast rather than the clips that the New York Post puts out, rather than the clips that find their way on social media, because the clips can be taken out of context a little bit. I think if you listen to the interview from start to finish, you'll get a really good sense of where Steve Cohen is at. I did. I know I saw some of the clips first because I didn't have time to listen to the podcast straight through. And I listened to some of the clips and I was like, okay, all right. I'm okay. This is fine. But then when I listened to the podcast from start to finish and the whole interview, I think Cohen came off as candid. I think Cohen came off as honest, brutally honest at times. And I had no issues really with anything that he said. I had no issues with anything Steve Cohen had to say. Nothing was particularly surprising. But again, I thought the honesty was something that you don't normally get from an owner. And I think it was Joel Sherman who said it on the podcast, that a lot of people are like, where's Cohen? Cohen doesn't speak. Cohen needs to speak. And he said, Cohen speaks a lot more than a lot of owners do. And I do agree with that. And I'm not the biggest John Heyman fan. I'm not the biggest Joel Sherman fan. But I thought that their questions were fair. I thought their questions were not softballs. When I first saw that Cohen was going on this podcast, I was like, wow, man, you're picking a soft landing spot. And I think to a degree that's true. I think he picked people he's comfortable with, and that's fine. That's his choice. And that's his right, and he did. But I don't think so. They weren't going to grill him. This isn't some deposition. But at the same time, I thought they were very fair in their line of questioning. I thought they were critical when they needed to be. And I thought they asked him questions, and they asked him follow-ups, and they asked him clarification questions that allowed him to really expound on some of the things that he was saying. And so, again, I thought he was honest. I thought he was candid. I thought he came across as genuine. And this concept that Steve Cohen doesn't speak is nonsense, because he speaks a lot more than some owners do, most owners. This concept that Steve Cohen doesn't care, I think, is nonsense. It's very clear to me that Steve Cohen cares. Now, does Steve Cohen care about other things too? Yes. Steve Cohen's a billionaire. He cares about making money. Does Steve Cohen care about the casino and the development around Citi Field? Yes. Is that part of the reason why he bought the Mets? Probably. We're not here to talk about the nature of billionaires. We could talk about that somewhere else. I certainly have my thoughts. We're not here to talk about that on a Mets show. From a Mets perspective, I am happy that they have an owner that has a lot of money in a still to this point currently uncapped sport and is willing to invest that money. To me, that's all the care that you need to see. He invests that money in players. He invests that money in development. He invests that money in infrastructure. He invests that money in coaches and in front office personnel. He puts his money where his mouth is. To me, that's all you need to do to show that you care. And beyond that, he shows that he cares by coming on shows and talking. So I respect it. A lot was made of Steve Cohen basically saying that David Stearns is going to finish out his contract, and he did hedge on that a little bit after asked some follow-ups. But I don't have an issue with it, guys, because I think if you thought like David Stearns was going to get fired this year, I think you were foolish. Point blank. Now, I'm not saying that on merit, David Stearns hasn't done enough to get himself fired. I think he has. But if you ever thought that Steve Cohen was going to fire this guy in season, you're sorely mistaken. And if you thought he was going to fire him in the offseason, I thought you were mistaken too, because why would he? That would put the Mets on 6 GMs / president of baseball operations in Cohen's tenure. That would put the Mets in a situation where they need to conduct a full-scale GM / president of baseball operations search, then a full-scale managerial search in an offseason that is going to be truncated by a lockout. And then they have to try to figure out which coaches are staying, and they have to figure out how to add to that coaching staff, and then they probably have to figure out how they're going to replace undoubtedly some front office personnel that leaves. And then they have to figure out how they could jump the free agent market and the trade market for players, knowing that the CBA is going to expire sometime in December and that free agency is going to be a little bit of a mad dash and that trades might be a little bit of a mad dash before they shut down the league. You want to do all that? Do you really want to do all that in a couple weeks from when the World Series ends? It's more than a couple weeks. A few weeks from when the World Series ends to when the CBA ends? I don't. And I don't think that that is good business. So I never thought they were going to let go of David Stearns. Again, this is not a endorsement of the job that David Stearns has done. And I am a fan of David Stearns. I was a fan of the move when they brought him in. And I thought things that would be better. But this is not an endorsement. This is just a look at the landscape, guys. Take one step back and look at the big picture and realize that it's kind of stupid to do, quite frankly. It's too many moving parts. There's too much uncertainty. Don't give yourself more. The last thing I'll say about Cohen's appearance on this podcast is I noticed something that I had never noticed before. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of John Heyman. I'm not a big fan of Joel Sherman. They're not the beat reporters that I would go to if I'm looking for, the real nitty gritty of Mets stuff. I think for my money, Will Salmon is the best at it right now. Will Salmon has been on my other show, Till Mets Do His Part, a bunch. I think he's great. I think Abby Mastracco does a great job. She's also been on Till Mets Do His Part. And I really like Laura Albanese. I think she does a great job. We're trying to get her on the show as well. So, and some of those people might appear here on Mets Daily. Who knows? Alongside me. But I don't like Heyman. I don't like Sherman. I think they're a bit jaded. I think they're dinosaurs in some of their views. But I never noticed this before because I don't listen to their show. But I listen to this show in its entirety. Don't watch the show. Just listen to it. Close your eyes for 1 second while you're listening to it. And tell me it doesn't sound exactly like Steve Cohen is being interviewed about his baseball team by Woody Allen and RFK Jr. Oh my God. It dawned on me, I don't know, maybe halfway through the show. And then I could not unhear it. And so I think you should listen to this podcast. I think you should listen to Steve Cohen's interview because I think Steve Cohen gives you a lot of insight as to where the Mets are at right now and where he sees the future. I think that's important if you're a Mets fan. But I also think you can maybe have a little bit of a laugh if you listen to it too. We're going to do a quick series preview of the 4-game set in Atlanta. Mets take a trip down to ATL that has not been a place, obviously, that has treated the Mets well. It's one of those wraparound series that you get sometimes over the holiday weekend. Mets have an off day today. They play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in Atlanta. And because the season has fallen to the point that it has fallen to, I don't know that we need to do series previews like how I was doing them, in the sense that I don't know if we need to talk about specific pitching matchups and, highlight some guys here and there. We'll still do that from time to time, but I don't know if we're going to do it every single series the exact same way because the Mets win-loss record doesn't matter. So diving into some of the X's and O's is kind of boring to me if the Mets have told you by waving the white flag and by their play and by being 15 games under that their results don't matter. Their wins and losses don't matter. So I want to look a little bit towards individual results. And let's see how that feels as we preview these series. Let's try to highlight very specific things rather than talking about, it's Sean Manaea versus Chris Sale in game 2 and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I don't want to do that because, again, I just find that to be uninteresting at the point of the season that the Mets have gotten us to. So the Atlanta Braves, 50-34. We talked about them a little bit. They currently lead the NL East. They've got a slim, 2.5 game lead over Philadelphia, who's making a push. But don't worry, the New York Mets are in last place in the NL East, sitting 15.5 games behind the Braves. So yeah, I guess if the Mets sweep the Braves this weekend, the Mets can cut that number to 11.5 games. And then they'd be right back in it, you guys. Right back in it. The Mets pitching, I think, is the most important thing to look at for this series. And each reason is there's something different in each instance. So Christian Scott's going to open the series on Friday. Christian Scott came back off the IL after a short stint. He looked good in his last start. They obviously were a little careful with him. They were watching the pitch count. They were watching the innings. He didn't go deep. I think he went 4 innings plus, 4 1/3, 4 2/3, something like that. Didn't qualify for the win, but pitched well. So I want to just see if Scott can continue to be what Scott has been this season, which has largely been a revelation for the New York Mets, proving that he is going to be a contributor in the rotation for a long time. And I just want to see if he can go a little longer. Now that he's got one start back under his belt, I'd like to see the Mets push the pitch count a little higher and just see if he can go deeper into this game. Then you do have the aforementioned Sean Manaea versus Chris Sale. I think this is a game the Mets will definitely lose because the Mets have a hard time with left-handed pitching. The Mets have a hard time with good pitching, and Chris Sale is both. He's a good left-handed pitcher. bad left-handed pitchers have made the Mets look terrible. So I think that there's going to be some issues here against Sale, but I want to see what Manaea can do because, again, Manaea's results have been a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of wins and losses. The Mets haven't always done him favors, but since he's come into the rotation, he's been pretty good. I don't think Manaea is a trade candidate for the New York Mets because I think he's owed too much money and he hasn't been good enough. But I do think that because of that, Manaea is going to play some kind of a role on the Mets in 2027. And after what was a great 2024 where he gets a contract, then a bad lost 2025 where he's not good at all, and then the start to 2026 where he couldn't get into the rotation and his velocity was down and he was just real bad, this second half bounce back or 3/4 of a season bounce back from Sean Manaea is important. So I just like to see Sean Manaea continue to do what he's been doing so that he can prove to the Mets that he's going to be pitchable in 2027. Because if he's a fourth starter or fifth starter in 2027, he's pitching like this, like he has been, that's fine. It's not fine. It's not great value for $25 million, but it's fine. It's certainly better than what he was giving the Mets at the start of 2026. So I just want to see Manaea continue to be good enough. Similarly, Nolan McLean gets the start on Sunday. And I just want to see Nolan McLean build off of what was a really, really good start against the Toronto Blue Jays. I said it going into the series with Toronto that I thought McLean could show you a little bit of 2025 McLean, the rookie year McLean, the 8 starts when he first came up, because there was no real book on him with Toronto. Toronto had never faced him before, and all the scouting reports in the world, all the video in the world is no substitute for standing in the box and taking it at bat against Nolan McLean. It's true of any pitcher, but especially a guy who relies on spin rate and a guy who does a lot of different things as far as McLean is concerned, with spinning the baseball, making things difficult for opposing hitters to get comfortable. So, and that's what we saw. But I'd like to see him do it now against a team that he's faced before in the Atlanta Braves and a team that has had a better offensive season, at least in totality, than the Toronto Blue Jays. And last but certainly not least, on Monday, we get Freddie Peralta again. And Freddie Peralta, we don't need to waste more time talking about him. I just want to see Freddie Peralta be better so that he can build up his value. Maybe the Mets can trade him. You know, they don't have a ton of time. There's not a ton of starts between now and the trade deadline, which is just about a month away. So Freddie Peralta will probably have something like 4 starts between now and then. So if the Mets want to get anything out of him, they need 4 good starts out of him. And it starts on Monday. Or whatever the number is. 3 good starts, 5 good starts. I don't know. I haven't looked at the entire month. But basically, let's just call it 4. And the Mets need to get 4 good starts out of him if they want to trade him. And it starts on Monday. That's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, sitting at just over 4,000 subscribers, we would love to get to 5,000 by the end of the season. And more than that, we would love for you to be a part of that group. Until next time, I'm John Saponaro. See you tomorrow.